Kath Irvine is the creator of the Edible Backyard. She's a permaculture expert, an organic gardener. She is based in Oho on the Kapiti coast. And she's with me now. Hi, Kath.
Good morning, Kim.
Are you an I thought you were an Otaki.
No, I'm not an Otaki any longer. I'm in the sunny Horowhenua in Oho, yes.
Does that make gardening easier?
Then Otaki, well, originally I was up Otaki Gorge where the soil's very heavy, and the Horowhenua is a beautiful place to grow stuff for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, congratulations on the new book. It takes people back to basics in terms of how to organise it, where to put the greenhouse, what sort of beds to make. But what you want to talk about this morning, I think, given that spring has sprung, I was a bit dismayed, actually. I was feeling very happy yesterday because I could officially declare that spring had sprung. But then I saw the first white cabbage butterfly and became despondent. What do you do for them?
Cabbage white butterflies?
Yes.
Well, there's a few. The easiest and most instant thing to do is to cover your crops with an insect mesh, which you can easily get online, and you set up some close hoops or even simply some stakes and chuck a net over. It's divine.
It always makes me feel like I'm living in some kind of barricaded fortress.
Well, it's so much easier than spraying.
It's not actually. It's not easier than spraying. That's the problem, isn't it? Spraying is so easy.
Well, spraying, there's an organic thing that you can get hold of. Bacillus thuringiensis, if I'm saying it correctly, is the active ingredient in something called dipel. And I know naturally neem do sell it. And it's a bioinsecticide, which sounds kind of dreadful, but it's caterpillar specific. And you can use that, mix that up and use that and spray it on your brassicas. It relies on them. So when they hatch out, they take a nibble of the leaf and wither up and die. It's quite exhilarating until you realise that, of course, monarch butterflies and other beneficial, many beneficial insects also begin as a caterpillar. So,
but they're not going to eat my cabbages.
I know, but we need...
Not that I can grow cabbages. Not that I've ever grown a decent cabbage in my entire life.
Cabbage is a tricky Kim. How about start with broccoli?
Yeah, I can do broccoli. In fact, I've got broccoli trees, which just have the little tiny shoots on them now, and I just eat all the little tiny shoots.
They're so beneficent, aren't they? They just go and go and go.
Yeah.
I think covering is much better than spraying. I was just kind of wanting to present all the options. Of course, if you've got all the time in the world, you can actually wander around and get into a little bit of a zen state and flick all the eggs off underneath the leaves and squash the caterpillars, which I actually did do that through lockdown, like the last lockdown we had with all that time. And, it was kind of therapeutic.
It's strangely satisfactory. Nice. Yes, I know.
But ultimately, the ultimate thing is there is a parasitic wasp that will gobble up those caterpillars. And actually, my daughter managed to get an amazing photo of one in the midst of it, which is in my book.
Uh-huh.
And the more diverse your environment, so these predatory wasps, you call them in when you have a really diverse growing environment, and by diverse that simply means a massive variety of different types of plants and nectars and pollens flowering throughout the year. So you start to call in this guild of beneficial insects, and they really do eventually start to self-regulate and really come in and do a lot of the management. For me, this is the ultimate. This is the long-term goal. So I think you use covers in the meantime while you're progressing along to that stage, a combination of covers and digital control of squashing, and keep building your diversity each season with adding in new plants to call them in and house them, So that's the ultimate, and then you don't even have to think about it so much.
Where does grass scrub and indeed porina moth? Somebody's asked me about porina moth. Where do they fit into your guild of beneficial insects?
Exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. So it's the same answer for everything. So when we think about diversity, you want to stretch your mind out beneath the ground as well as also above the ground. And when you've got a pest that's starts underground in the way that grass scrub does, quite often they're coming and colonizing areas where you've got big swathes of grass. There's just like one crop going on, and everyone's rushing around being upset about dandelions and clover in their lawn, when in actual fact they're the very things that are going to kick off this whole cycle of diversity below ground to then moderate the amount of a pest that's coming in response to your monoculture. So the more diverse we can have our growing environment, the better, and we can walk towards this beautiful self-regulation. And in fact, trees are really important here, like good big size roots. So even if you have a small section, the more a small tree like a kowhai or shrubs getting into berries and shrubs with those bigger roots, they all contribute to this diversity below ground.
Somebody says, my mother used to boil the outer leaves of lettuce and spray that on her cabbages, which works a treat to deter the white butterflies.
Beautiful.
Did you know that?
I've never heard of that before. I'm constantly amazed and delighted at the special potions people come up with for their and I love that. To me, that's such an important part of gardening, is the observation and the interaction. It's like this little lovely play and teamwork we have with nature, and just by watching and observing, we can come up with little solutions if we don't spin out into that. You know how we do that whole catastrophizing thing. We automatically go to the worst case scenario. But if you're going to stay calm and observe what's happening and notice the simple things that are going on, you can quite often come up with really plain and ordinary solutions to stuff. Like, you might notice something's going wrong. Just pay attention to what the plant is growing next to and how the season's been. You might not even get an answer or a solution to it immediately. You just tuck that observation away, and in time all those observations come together, and you go, oh, right, maybe I just won't plant my lettuces with my onions. They just don't like each other.
Don't they?
Oh, I was just saying as an example. And in actual fact, companion planting, I'm convinced, companion planting is different in different environments and ecosystems. I know everyone wants a rule. We all want a rule, because then we can just go, oh, that's the rule, and we can stick with it. But in actual fact, we just have to keep coming back to our own quiet observations and trust the feedback that we get from the garden,
Somebody else boils rhubarb leaves to spray brassica insects. That's not a bad idea. Rhubarb leaves seem to be, they're toxic anyway.
Rhubarbs are a common one, definitely, for sure. But you do have to be quite careful with those sprays, because you end up knocking back the beneficial insects as well.
Right.
And there's such a lot. There's so many insects, we don't even know really what they're doing. And on the whole, I guess I optimistically believe that most are beneficial. There's not a lot which aren't. And really they respond to the insects and the pests come in response to our gardening environment.
What about those grey aphids on brassicas that you get all summer?
Yeah, it's the same thing. If you want to, so what's happening when we get pests is the way that we the way that we grow and manage our soil directly impacts the flavour of our plants, as you will. So if you're chucking in a lot of nitrogen, or if you're throwing in artificial fertiliser, you get these sugary sweet growths happening on your plants.
Are you blaming the victim here? Are you saying that it's my bad gardening that has led me to be infested with aphids?
I'm saying possibly it's your enthusiastic, possibly overfeeding of your soil.
Not me.
It's done out of love. Not you. You're the opposite.
Don't do it. It's got a benign neglect. Maybe I'll throw some comfrey juice over it and some worm pea over it from time to time, but that's all right, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Start mulching, Kim, because you're in Wellington, so you've probably got heavy clay soil. Would that be correct?
It's not too bad. It comes and it goes, up and down, depending on what altitude you're at. Somebody wants to know is it all right, and this was my very question as well, to put seaweed on the garden without washing off the salt?
Yes.
That salt doesn't
absolutely.
matter. Jolly good.
Well, I think that when we think of salt, we think of a bag of salt, which has been boiled down and boiled might be the wrong word, but it's been concentrated down, hasn't it? So, seaweed is an amazing mineral rich. I dream of living by a seaweed coast, so I can. It is so good.
Seaweed's
I just put it straight on and chuck some mulch on top of it, so it's not.
All right. Well, here's a mulchy question. Can you use freshly mulched trees and shrub stuff, or do you have to wait until it's composted? Depends where you want to put it, I imagine.
Absolutely. And also, once again, just use your wit and your common sense, really, because some things after they're mulched, they're incredibly hot. They're steaming even. So I'm a huge fan of pre-rotting everything. And one of my top tips for everybody is to just always be foraging and collecting organic matter and piling it up. When things are pre-rotten, the worms start to come in, and they're at they're much more easily absorbed into the soil in that way rather than a raw product.
Poor Glenda has told me that she bought 2,000 worms, but there were no instructions, so she just threw them around the garden. Was that stupid? I've only seen 3 since.
I think they were probably intended for her worm farm.
I thought so.
Her food scraps. Yeah,
and they're not the same worms. Different sorts of worms.
Different types of worms. Yeah, different types of worms. So they need to be in the food scraps, not just randomly thrown around, the poor worms.
Somebody says our front garden is our septic field with disposal lines underground with lawn and fruit trees. Is the soil in this environment okay? I suppose you could just look at the fruit trees. If they're healthy, then it's all right. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And something at this time of year, is a really great thing for everyone to do, no matter how big or small your garden, is to do a little soil test, your own soil test. And I recommend you do it every year at the same time. And you dig up a spade by spade bit of soil and have a look at it and check it out. And if you just take a little photo, super easy these days with your phone, and you can compare it year on year. This building of soil business, because we can't see it and we have no comparison, like is it working? Are we doing it well? Well, if you take a little record every year, a little photo of your soil, you can gradually see it working its way towards that lovely chocolate brownie type fabric, which is the holy grail of soil for the food gardener. And so dig some up and have a little look. And just use your senses. You don't necessarily need to go and get a test at all. Your senses are perfectly adequate here. So have a look at its colour. That will tell you one thing. So, range and scale from, at the very worst, most anaerobic is going to be that grey kind of blue colour with no air in it. And then at very wet, and the other end of that scale is sand. And then somewhere in the middle is this lovely loamy chocolate brownie stuff. And the answer to both conditions is exactly the same. It's just constantly adding organic matter in a little and often gentle way and keeping it quite natural. Like, just stay away from the little blue pills and things. There's no faster way to put your soil life to sleep than to put on artificial fertiliser. And just keep working along in this simple way. So that's you're looking at it for the colour. And give it a smell. Your smell tells you a lot about the health of your soil. So if it's musty and dry, if it smells musty, it's devoid of soil life. And then if it's at the other end of the scale, slippery and heavy and wet, it might smell sort of ammonia-y, is that a word?
Ammonia.
And then somewhere in between, where it's that lovely chocolate brownie, it'll just smell good. And it's not a scientific description, but you'll know that pleasant smell when you hit it, So you've got your smell, you've got your colour, and then finally you do this very old-fashioned little squeeze test to test for moisture and texture. And by simply holding a handful of soil give it a bit of pressure and squeeze it in your hand, then open your hand back out, give it a little shake. Most of it should sort of stick together, and you should be able to see little pores in it. This is when you're at Holy Grail stage, right? If you can squeeze it together and you could, do a bit of pottery with it, then your soil has still got a journey to go.
Yeah.
And at the other end, it will all fall through your fingers, right? It'll be so dry, it'll just all slip through your fingers. So, and if you do this little test every year, if you really want to, super helpful to just jot down some notes somewhere, and then you can have this little comparison year on year, and you really get this good visual in team with the health of your plants above ground as to how well your soil program, as it were, is working.
Here is Doreen, who's in Gisborne. Lucky Doreen. She says she's just bought her very first home, which has a lovely sunny backyard. It's pretty much a blank slate, just grass and a couple of old garden beds. I'm looking forward to creating a lovely garden with loads of fruit trees, veggies and flowers. What is the first thing I should do? I'm not on commission here, Doreen, but I think possibly the first thing you should do is buy Kath's book, because that's exactly what you tell people how to do. And one of the interesting things I found in your book is that you sit a while in the blank slate of the garden and you put some posts up where you want to put, say, an apple tree or a plum tree, and you just imagine how it would be and live with that for a while. You have to think about it for a while, don't you?
You do, and it's so much easier to move a stake around than to keep shifting and moving trees around. And I love to encourage this pause at the beginning to do in permaculture what we call make a base map, and spend at least 12 months, which no one wants to hear, but that's how it is.
Life is a bit short for that, don't you think?
No, because you can get all your veggies and everything growing in pots while you wait, you see. So you're not going to be without your veggies. You just grow in banana boxes, all the boxes you had from moving, just fill up with potting mix and plant out your veggies. So you can get some veggies growing by the house. The difference is when you get to know your environment, you can make really smart decisions, and you don't end up putting a tree in the north face and blocking all the light, or putting your tool shed where you actually realise, oh gosh, that would have been much better for my veggie bed in hindsight because that's sheltered. So you just do a little sketch. You get to know the winds, you get to know the frost. It's very, very simple, but gosh, what a document that information gathering brings you,
Yeah.
So that's my very best advice.
All right. I'm looking through all these questions and wondering what we've dealt with. Oh, rust on garlic. You talk about rust on garlic in your book. What do you do about that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It's a very it's been a very new experience for me. Rust, that little tiny airborne.
Is it the same as the sort of rust that gets on the silver beet and the beans? Is it the same?
No, well, they're different. They're different varieties of rust, but they have the kind of same. They operate in the same kind of fashion. And my answer to that, again, we sort of come back to that whole diversity. So rather than planting a whole lot of crops all together, is to dot them around the garden, and have a massive variety. So take your mind out of the whole visual of the market garden with straight rows of one crop taking up whole spaces, and dot things about. It's a really great strategy.
What are the huge worms that are about as, this is from somebody, as round as my little finger and about 18 centimetres long?
Yeah.
Are they just inflated earthworms, or are they special worms?
There are different types, so they zoom around. They don't zoom around at all. Actually, they're very slow. And generally, you're going to find those in the heavy clay soils. You see, the soil beneath our feet is organised in all these incredible layers of different types of biology at different level, all working together to build topsoil at the top, which actually takes an incredibly long time. And so you'll find those big worms. I'm presuming that this person is in a really heavy clay
do you?
area. As she builds her soil, or he builds their soil up, the worm guild will start to change. Yeah. We got 45 seconds. I've noticed a sort of a flat worm with red round the edges sometimes. Do you know what that is? I think that's like a native worm. I think it actually eats worms, but I don't want to tell you that because you'll probably rush around and madly kill it. But
I don't like the look of it somehow.
I know they do look kind of evil. I do hear you there. They'll moderate as you get mulch income and improve your soil.
All right, I'll work on that. Somebody says, what about Epsom salts? I don't know what they're talking about. Do you?
Yeah, probably for thinking of maybe as an addition for citrus, but I just stick with seaweed and compost and manure and leaf mulch and all those lovely natural
All
things.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I will do what you say, and then I will check back in with you and report. Thank you, Kath.
Good job.
Kath Irvine.